Another day, another Serilution. Is it finally time for Legend of Zelda? Wii Sports? Vertigo? Oh, gross, no. Wait, did you hear that? Hey, wasn't that lamp in the corner? Oh, wait. Oh, God. Oh, wait, stop! No! What happened? Where? What's up with this shirt? Who's that?
It's me, your inner conscience. I've hijacked your dreams and trapped you in them until you meet my demands.
Well, what are your demands?
I've noticed you've been growing ever more selfish since you started living alone, burying yourself in your work, and refusing to reach out to others, locking yourself away from your family and friends.
I don't think it's that bad, you know? I talk to him still, and sometimes I call him, and it's just that I'm...
No! You probably couldn't even find your phone for this skit. You must play the Mother series to come to understand the importance of friendship, family, and love.
Wait. So let me get this straight. You want me to lock myself away and play video games to fix my problem of locking myself away from others? That's your big plan?
Well, yeah, when you put it that way, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, it sounds good to me. Let's get started. Hello, wonderful wonders of the internet. So you probably know this guy, Ness, from Super Smash Brothers! And you might even know the game he's from, Earthbound on the Super Nintendo. And maybe, just maybe, you know that Earthbound is actually the second game in the Mother series, Mother 2. But I doubt that you know that Earthbound has its entire story, characters, and soundtrack all ripped from Mother 1. So let's look into the 1992 classic, Mother 1 for the Famicom. Or, if you're American like me, the 2012 release, Earthbound Beginnings. Because what's a mother? Nintendo doesn't know what a mother is. I don't know what a mother is. What was the Mother series? It doesn't exist. Forget about it. I'll never forget Nintendo.
Mother 1 was a very ambitious RPG, released back when RPGs were the hot stuff in Japan. You got your Dragon Quest trilogy, a couple Final Fantasies, and even some Zeldas thrown into the mix. But nothing had been done quite like Mother. Just by looking at the title itself, Mother is a good way to set the tone for the game, as you're not some young adult swordsman off to fight a dragon or evil pig monster on an epic quest. You're just a kid from a regular family in a world very similar to our own. And since this world is so much like our own, you'll find many everyday objects and people as enemies. From lamps to hippies to out-of-control cars, the enemy variety definitely got a chuckle out of me every now and then, and keeps you on your toes, wondering what next wacky thing you'll find. And the game wastes no time throwing these things at you, as immediately right out of the gate, you'll be fighting a lamp and this creepy doll. You'll get a melody from this doll, and take your grandfather's mysterious diary from the basement and a cracked bat, and off you go on an adventure to find out what's causing all this weirdness. In classic NES fashion, this game gives you very little direction on where to go and what to do. But luckily, many NPCs will give you a hint on each town's unique problems and the solutions to them. And with a little exploring, you'll find these solutions, and you'll find the land of Magicant, where you learn that you need to find 8 different melodies in order to create some magical song to stop an evil alien threat. And as for main story beats, that's about all you'll get until the end of the game, so you best get out there exploring to find those melodies. And one of the most interesting things about this game is that it's borderline open world. I mean, let's look at the map real quick. Alright, so here's where you can go at the start, and then here's where you can go after you clear the zoo, which is essentially the first boss. And after getting the train station, you can literally go anywhere in the game except for the last boss. So that's everything. The world is your oyster to explore. And at first, I found myself marveling at this, because as of late, I've been under the impression that all open world games are simply the best, plain and simple. But one thing ruined this open world game for me, and that's Yes, it's what I'm trying to say.
Stop!
Okay, you get it. Random battles are constant in this game, sometimes taking place after every single step you take, and it takes forever to get anywhere. This reminds me how much I've been spoiled by more modern RPG games that have improved this feature, like Pokemon Sword and Shield and Xenoblade Chronicles. Truly random encounters are something I believe should stay away from RPGs as much as possible. I think the game's creator agrees, as in the next installments, they immediately alleviate this issue by making enemies roaming, which we'll get to later.
So there are two huge reasons why this exploration bothers me. One is because of enemy movesets, and two is the motivation for exploration.
So for enemy movesets, many of the game's later enemies have a move called PK Gamma Beam, which 100% of the time will one-hit KO a party member unless they are equipped with the Franklin badge, of which there is only one. So instead of being able to explore, you'll have to constantly go back to town to revive party members that are getting one-shotted by a move that is 100% accurate, or you can just simply game over and lose all your money. Second is our motivation for exploration, and this game requires that you explore every nook and cranny. As I mentioned earlier, your main goal in Mother is to find all 8 melodies, and this is a pretty common setup for most RPGs, so I was expecting the standard RPG fare of traveling the land, beating 8 bosses that are protecting each of the 8 melodies. But nope! In fact, I'm not even sure I can recall any of the bosses at all in Mother 1, other than the final boss. Instead, the melodies are just simply strewn over the overworld in what seem to be somewhat random locations that are kind of hinted at by villagers. I would be in shock and awe if you found all these melodies without a guide. I mean, the first one, you have to talk to a random doll in your house? Like, how would you ever know that without guessing? And another is a random cactus in the middle of a desert. Like, this massive desert that is like almost like an eighth of the entire game map. I mean, I'm all for exploration, but I feel like this game, even though it's a fun take on a standard RPG, could use a lot of brush-ups in almost every area.
Okay, that game didn't teach me anything about love and friendship. If anything, it taught me that going out into the world and exploring is terrible. It's a bother, it's a pain, I might die. Why would I even do any of that?
Yeah, that one's kind of bad, but your journey's just beginning, and trust me, it only gets better from here.
Well, it's as the voice says. The next installment in the series, Earthbound, was an incredible improvement from Mother 1 in every way. Let's get into it, shall we?
Now, as I said earlier, a lot of Earthbound is borrowed from Mother 1. I mean, you had a young psychic boy with a red baseball cap who goes on a journey to stop an alien named Gygus from destroying the world. And, to stop him, we have to befriend 3 other kids along the way. A psychic girl, a nerd, and a tough guy, and we collect 8 magical melodies along our way. Pretty similar, right? But the execution is oh so different in all the right ways. You see, Mother 1 was lacking in impactful set pieces in many of its areas, making them very forgettable since nothing of note happened in most of them, other than maybe finding a song or a new party member occasionally. But in Earthbound, each area is chock full of unique characters and events that'll stick in your memory. Like, remember the time when you're fighting a cult that's trying to paint the whole world blue? Or when you get set to an alternate version of Fourside called Moonside that's full of senseless dialogue that will not only leave you confused, but maybe even a little creeped out. Did that guy just say demons inside? And unlike Mother 1, which front-loads its story at the beginning and end of the game, Earthbound keeps you engaged in its story throughout your entire journey in Eagle Land. And one of the ways it does this is having a continuous villain and evil entity appear throughout the entire game that's always one tiny step ahead of you. Quick spoiler alert for a game that's a quarter-century year old. Alright. The main villain in this game is the Mani Mani statue and your childhood friend, Pokey. One of the best things a game can do with a villain is make you hate them, to fuel your motivation to stop them, and ooh man do I hate Pokey. At every turning point of your adventure, he looks down on you with that dumb smirk of his. He starts up as just your cowardly next door neighbor who's worthless in a fight, but for some reason, he keeps getting involved with every villain. You'll see him as a supporter of the Happy Happyism cult, an informant to Monotoli, who's oppressing the entire city of Fourside, and by the end of the game, he's assisting the greatest evil of all, Gygus. And the worst part of all is you never even get to defeat him. You just fight him once, and that slippery snake eludes you right before the world collapses. But oh, do I love to hate Pokey. So the game has memorable locations, memorable baddies, but it has one more thing that Itoi added, updates to the enemy encounters. As I mentioned before, this game has done away with random encounters in favor of overworld spawns. Not only does this allow you to know what you're going to fight, or let you avoid fighting it, but it also introduced a first strike system, where you can sneak up on enemies, and if you sneak up behind them, the battle will turn green and you'll get a free surprise attack. But be careful, as this system is a two-edged sword, and enemies can also spring up behind you and turning the battle intro red, giving them a bonus surprise attack. This makes exploring much more interesting and connects the exploration portion of the game to the fighting portion of the game, as how you approach battle directly affects your chances of success. Also, if you get a green circle surprise on a weak enemy, you'll instantly kill them and get the experience for free. There are a lot of games that could use this sort of convenience, and I love it, especially once you beat an area. All the enemies in that area will recognize your power and run away from you, pretty much guaranteeing that you'll be able to get the jump on them. The battle system also has some updates, and I'm not only talking about those snazzy backgrounds instead of that boring black screen the first game had. Nah, I'm talking about the rolling health bar. So most RPGs, you get hit and it's like BAM! You take the damage instantly. But in Earthbound, damage is done in real time, so even if you get mortally wounded, if you end up using a healing move before your health reaches 0, you can still survive a mortally wounding blow. This makes battles really engaging and tense when you have to frantically work through the menus just so you can save a team member. Also, the PK Gamma Beam spells are nowhere to be found, so there's no more instant death from common enemies. There are a few enemies who have spells that can diamondize or instant KO you, but these enemies are only found in the final areas of the game, and they also don't have a 100% chance of happening. It's more like 20%. Earthbound also tightens in the open world to give us more linear adventure, as pretty much every melody has to be found in a certain order. But this allows the game to give us much more interesting and fun scenarios to work through, and these scenarios were so gripping that I usually was more interested in solving the town's problems instead of finding the next melody. But fortunately, doing so was usually one and the same. Oh, but don't think for a second that there's no need to explore, as there are tons of little things to do around each town. Many events you'll find are cleverly tied to the main story, but most of the time, you probably won't even notice because the things are so interesting and fun to do. And don't even get me started on the game's humor. I mean, some of this dialogue is so bonkers that it will have you laughing out loud. Like, look at this! Your party may, for the most part, be planks of wood as far as character goes, but all the NPCs you interact with in the overworld really make this game something special. Really, my only complaint with this overall phenomenal game is that at some points, especially at the last couple sanctuaries of the game, it starts to feel a little unimaginative and way too easy. I mean, once you get multi-bottle rockets for Steph, you can use those to one-shot most of the bosses. No item should be that strong. The dungeons themselves usually aren't very innovative and are mostly just brown caves that lead to the shiny star boss. But all the unique and interesting experiences before you get to the dungeons is really what makes this game shine, and will keep it as one of my favorite games for many years to come. But wait, what's that? Do you hear it? After the credits roll, we receive a letter from Pokey, teasing at his return in Mother 3.
Okay, so you're right. I think I did learn something. Oh, that going on adventures with friends can be exhilarating, and that we can do all kinds of things if we work together. And we'll learn all kinds of things from random wacky characters that we meet along the way.
Close, but still not quite it. But let's wrap this up with your last adventure, Mother 3.
This game has a bit of an odd history, as it was originally going to be released for the N64DD in 2000. You don't know what the N64DD is? You didn't know the N64 was going to have discs at one point? Well, that's because it flopped in Japan and never made it to America, so they just gave up on that. And the game was temporarily put to the side, but then came back in 2006 as a title for the GBA, which only came out in Japan. But we'll get it eventually, right, Reggie?
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3! How about this instead?
Oh, I see. Well, I guess not then. Okay. Lucky for us, some fans at Starman.net, led by Clyde the Tomato, made a fan translation for us English speakers over here that never got the official release. So we'll be using that to check it out today. Links in the description below.
Mother 3 takes place in the same universe as Earthbound, but in an entirely different location called the Nowhere Islands. We follow the story of Tasmilli Village and the residents that live there. And one of those residents is our very own protagonist, Lucas, who is a small child living with his family. The village lives in peace with nature, and all villagers help each other to get by in life with no need for currency or technology. However, one day mysterious pig creatures start causing havoc in the woods and create these beasts called Chimera that are half machine and half animal, in order to make them quote-unquote badder, tougher, and radder. And I really don't want to spoil too much of this game's story because I'm pretty sure a lot of you haven't played it yet, so go play Mother 3 after this video. And Mother 3's design is heavily focused on storytelling, which lets the story have all sorts of twists and turns that will bring feelings of joy and dread. The adventure is best done going in blind. However, I do want to talk about the way they tell this game's story and how it's very different from the first two Mother installments. The game is broken up into 7 different chapters, and in many of them, you will play as different characters, giving you different perspectives to the story unfolding, and leaving you with many cliffhangers where you'll have to wait and find out what happened in later chapters. This constant changing of playable characters was explored briefly in previous titles like Mother 1, where Teddy gets switched out for Lloyd on Mount Itoi, or in Earthbound, where you have short sections where you get to play as Jeff and Pooh respectively for their intro to the story before they join the main team. But in Mother 3, it's very different, as you'll be yanked around to these different characters who aren't simply going through a quest to meet up with the main team of heroes. Instead, each character has their own motivation and goals that they want to achieve, making them much more fleshed out and alive than the characters ever were in Earthbound or Mother 1. No more planks of wood here! I personally really enjoy the switching up of heroes a lot, as each new chapter feels like a new beginning to a new adventure, which is one of my favorite feelings in gaming, that feeling of starting anew. So characters will come and go throughout your adventure, and it's really hard to tell where they may appear later. But eventually, you'll settle into a main team and go on a quest to pull the 7 needles before the evil pigmask pull them. These needles hold the fate of the island in their hand, and must be pulled by Lucas, lest the island be put into a great peril. On a less dramatic note, this game also brings back a great feature from Mother 1, the ability to run. For some reason in Earthbound, you couldn't run. I guess it's because the world was pretty condensed and linear, so you didn't have to go back and forth to many areas very often. But now in Mother 3, you can bonk into weak enemies while running past, or bonk into the environment to interact with them. They also added a new feature to the battle system called Sound Battles. You can now time your button presses to the beat of the battle in order to combo hits together, and different enemies have different beats to learn. It's really hard to do, and I feel like they could have added a little more tutorial, as I hardly noticed its existence in my first playthrough and couldn't get the hang of it, as the only character that mentions it is this one little ant. And it's not even mentioned until the second chapter of the game, which is a couple hours in, but it does add a note of complexity. Most of the fixes from Mother 1 to Earthbound that I mentioned earlier, such as rolling health meters, overworld enemy spawns, and battle initiatives when sneaking up behind enemies, are thankfully also present in Mother 3. And they even added a new feature to defending, where when you defend, it slows down the spinning health, adding a new layer of complexity to combat.
Mother 3 tells a wonderful story while wrapping it up all in that same addictive gameplay we came to love in Earthbound. If I had to nitpick about anything though, it might be the end of the game. So the last chapter is more your standard RPG fare. It gets rid of all those crazy mix-ups we had at the beginning of the game with new characters being introduced every once in a while and your party getting swapped around. But I do have to admit that even as I say that, I remember the epic build-off and epic payoff it had at the end of the game when everyone came together and but you know, go play it for yourself and you'll find out what I'm talking about. Now, Shigesato Itoi himself said there'd be no Mother 4 and the games are a trilogy and it would end at that. But that hasn't stopped fans from making a Mother 4. As you see, a new fan game is in the works and has been in the works for a while, but is now being renamed Oddity for obvious reasons. But we can still theorize what we would hope to see in this new fan game, or if Shigesato Itoi ever changes his mind, which he probably won't, Mother 4. So let's get talking, shall we?
So all these games are very different kinds of RPGs. Mother 1 is an open world and exploratory adventure. Earthbound pulls back the open world for a more tight and interesting linear adventure, and Mother 3 sacrifices the larger world but brings us a cast with more gripping dialogue and storytelling that is on a level hardly even comparable to the first two. But if I had to pick between which of these I'd like to see to make a return, it would definitely be Earthbound. Despite how gripping Mother 3's story was, there are just so many more unique, self-contained stories in Earthbound that I enjoyed so much. So let me clarify how Earthbound displays its world. So in each area you enter, you have some sort of odd problem plaguing it that our heroes have to solve. You then interact with unique characters and get caught up in sometimes serious, but usually wacky scenarios that stick in your head after the credits roll. The main thing I'd want to change is how the setup for dungeons is handled. Usually in Earthbound, you'd clear a city's problem and then have to go through a short and bland dungeon to get a melody. If they could somehow interweave the city's problem with the dungeon and the power spot, that would make for a really interesting and really clean up those bland moments. I would also love to see more characters in Mother 4 get a similar treatment to how characters were treated in Mother 3. There are two things Mother 3 does that it really helps manage their characters. One of those is having many different party members. Some are NPCs that fight on their own, and some are controllable. The latter is obviously preferred, as controlling your character is much more interesting, but both are fun to play around with. The second thing I already talked about earlier is those character intro chapters that allow you to get a new adventure with a new character. This lets the character really get fleshed out before they simply become a silent party member following the leader. So yeah, something of an Earthbound and Mother 3 fusion would definitely make for an awesome Mother 4 game. Sorry Mother 1, you were important, but you can't really hold a candle to your incredible sequels. So if for some reason you haven't checked out this incredible series yet, I would highly recommend checking it out. I'd especially suggest playing Earthbound first, since it's the easiest one available on the SNES Classic and Wii U and 3DS, and because it's the first one. And if you're still craving more after that, Mother 3 is the way to go. Downloading the fan-made game English translation is super easy and listed as a link below. And if you really want to become a Mother fan, you could check out Mother 1 or Earthbound Beginnings on the Wii U. Although honestly, you're probably better off just skipping Mother 1.
Well, that's it. I covered the Mother series. I've learned that traveling through life can be really tough sometimes, even a little lonely. If I get too stuck up in my own problems, I'll fall to worldly evils like consumerism, greed, and selfishness. But if I stick with my friends, we can overcome anything, and we can do incredible things, and we'll remind each other of what's really important. Each other.
That's the spirit. It looks like you finally learned how to be a decent human being. For now, at least.
Oh yeah, I'm back. I didn't notice. Wow. That's awesome. You know what? I think I'm gonna call my mom. Right after I charge my phone.
Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate all your support for all these videos I'm making. If you want to check out some other Serilution videos, I got a Luigi's Mansion one, as well as a Kirby one that's back on the channel. And for the next video, we're going to do something a little different. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. And we're also probably going to look at Animal Crossing in the upcoming days. So lots of stuff coming for this channel, and we're going to keep it going. Let's go, baby!